Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. The Supreme Court order prohibiting the sale and consumption of alcohol within a 500-meter distance of national or state highways has met with widespread criticism. It raises critical questions. Has the court overreached itself? Does the order assume citizens are irresponsible and treat them like children? And is the court aware of the sweeping economic consequences, or does it just not care? Tonight, we shall discuss the Supreme Court order at all these different levels. My guests are BJP spokesperson P.N. Vijay, Congress spokesperson Pavan Khera, the distinguished Supreme Court lawyer Sanjay Hegde, the executive director of the Bird Group Ankur Bhatia, who will be with us shortly, and the lawyer who brought the PIL that led to the Supreme Court order, Ravi Kamal Gupta. Mr. Gupta, it was in response to your PIL that the Supreme Court imposed a countrywide ban on alcohol sale or consumption within a 500-meter distance of national or state highways. Was this what you wanted, or is today's Times of India correct in claiming that your client Harman Sidhu believes the Supreme Court has overreached itself?
No, this was initially the move. The move was to curb the menace of drunken driving at every possible extent, to curb the practice of serving liquor in any form at any place along the highways, be it national or state. So, in my opinion, no, the Supreme Court with this honorable judgment has not overreached. It has rather done something which should have been done by the respective state governments.
Except that today's Times of India on its front page,
after giving a proper chance.
Except that, Mr. Gupta, today's Times of India on its front page, and I'm sure you've seen the story, quotes your client Harman Singh Sidhu, who's gone on record to say this is not what he wanted. He is very sorry that the pubs and restaurants and hotels are shut down. He says he likes a drink himself.
No. Even I am sorry to say that he has been quoted misdirectly, because I had a word with him after I read the Times of India today. He has been misquoted surprisingly. He never made a statement, and we are going to take a very strict view of this probably by tomorrow morning itself.
All right, you've clarified the situation. You say your client has been misquoted, but it is there in the Times of India. Sanjay Hegde, writing in today's Times of India, the Supreme Court lawyer C.R.M. Sundaram, who you know very well, has said that the Supreme Court order is akin to dictatorship. He asks, and I'm quoting him, how can 30 wise but unelected people exercise powers akin to legislation? Does Article 142 of the Constitution, which empowers the Supreme Court to pass orders to do complete justice for any cause or any matter before them, justify the court legislating where you can drink and where you cannot drink? Or has the Supreme Court overinterpreted that article and overextended itself?
Well, these criticisms are not unknown to Supreme Courts. The US Supreme Court has often been called 9 men above the law. The point is here that there were recommendations of a judicial commission. There was also an existing rule which said 220 meters, which was measured from the middle of the road. The Supreme Court was dealing with the problem of drunken driving. It had a long process, and it was over a year or so of hearings that finally it came to this conclusion of 500 meters. Thereafter, recently there were review petitions and other applications filed. An extensive hearing was heard, it was given even there. As far as the process goes, I would not fault the court. But as far as the ultimate result it goes, well, court judgments can't satisfy everyone. There is this cause that people while driving on highways should stay sober. They should not be subject to temptations. A line had to be drawn, whether it was 200 meters or 500 meters. At some stage, it does look like legislation, but it really was, in this case, adjudication.
All right, it looks like legislation, but it was adjudication. That's your opinion. I'll simply point out that your colleague C.R.M.S. Sundaram, writing in the Times of India, disagrees. He's described this as authoritarianism. He's described it as akin to dictatorship, and he says this is akin to legislation. But I'm not questioning you. I'm just pointing out there are different opinions on this issue. P.N. Vijay.
Well, Karan, just one clarification. Just one clarification.
No, go ahead.
Aryama and I have both appeared in the matters. Aryama and I have both appeared in the matter. We've appeared on the side of people who were affected by the order. We've made our arguments in court. Thereafter, our comments should be read in that context.
All right, that's fine. I understand what you're saying is that he has a position as an advocate who appeared on the opposite side. Fine, but it is nonetheless a position. Mr. Bhatia, let me put a similar question to you. Mr. Bhatia, let me put a similar question to you. You are with Boon Company. You represent, in fact, a group of companies that have an interest that has been very badly affected by the Supreme Court order. I want to ask you a simple question. Should judges be the ones who decide where alcohol can and cannot be consumed? Or is that for the executive to determine? To my mind, as a layman, this is an issue governments decide, not judges. And therefore, in your opinion, by determining precisely where alcohol can be bought and consumed, have the judges overreached themselves?
See, on the outset, the decision has come from the apex court of the country, and I think everybody should, so you should see that in that particular light. Now, the problem I see, Karan, in our country is that because the way urban development has happened, because of the way we have increased our, the cities have actually grown up. All the development has actually happened around national or state highways. If you have a look at Delhi, it's between Delhi and Gurgaon, and between Delhi and Gurgaon, that road is they call it a highway, but obviously it's more or less like a city road right now. On the fact is the same thing in the metropolis of Mumbai as well, and in other cities exactly the same issue. If you look at
yeah, but that I understand.
Bangalore, for example, Bangalore MG road passes through the center
I understand that. We all know that development happens on highways.
When the judge,
but my question was to do with whether judges are the ones who should decide where you can sell and where you can drink alcohol. I'll come to economic consequences later. I'm inviting you first as an intelligent layman to give me your opinion. Should judges decide this?
So, even if the judge has to decide that the person, I think it's an individual's prerogative to have or not have alcohol. A banning of 500 meters, if somebody is an alcoholic and would want to consume alcohol, he would do it whatever means what he has right now. I don't think that, yes, it will be a deterrent for a person to go and not consume alcohol, right, which is available on his doorstep. But, if somebody has to have alcohol, a judge can't, a judge or any other individual, not even a brother, wife, whatever, nobody can stop somebody to do that, no?
Absolutely. P.N. Vijay, let me quote something that Akar Patel, the head of Amnesty, wrote yesterday in his column in the Asian Age. He said, the state should treat adults as if they are responsible citizens whilst retaining the capacity to punish them when they behave irresponsibly. Instead, what the Supreme Court has done is to treat adults as if they are irresponsible and childlike and impose a ban. That, Akar Patel says, is an encroachment on the individual freedom of people. The Supreme Court, instead of treating us as citizens who are responsible, has behaved as if we can't be trusted, can't be thought to be responsible. Would you agree with that viewpoint?
I think it's very well put, Karan. I remember the old adage from 1,000 years back, which said the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I don't question the good intentions of our Supreme Court. They have passed excellent orders in the past, including the Bharat 4 fuel recently. But on this one, I humbly submit they're totally off the mark for two reasons. One is the simple reason that this is not going to work. If a person, as the other gentleman said, wants to have a drink, he will always carry a hip flask with him. Stop by at a dhaba, order for some food or some soda and have his drink. Now he'll carry a bigger hip flask. That will all happen. And secondly, so the best way to stop it, like they do in the rest of the civilized world, is to have petroling, effective petroling, to have, and this can happen even in Greater Kailash or Friends Colony. Drunken driving is rampant even within city roads after 11 p.m.
Absolutely.
So we need better traffic patrol people to take away your license for 10 years. That's what the rest of the world does. And this is a Tughlaq-like solution to the problem. Secondly, the economic hardship.
I'll come to the economic hardship in a moment, sir.
Yeah,
I'm stopping you. I'll come to the economic hardship in a moment. I'm stopping you. I want to stick for a moment with the judicial overreach, and I will definitely come to economic hardship. Let's take it step by step. Pavan Khera, the judiciary, in their explanation for what they were doing, said safety has to be supreme. And yet the amazing thing is that even though safety has to be supreme, they found it necessary to make an exception and exempt mountainous northeastern states. And Akar Patel very rightly says, if safety is supreme, then it must apply in the northeast as well. How can you say safety is a concern in the plains, hence there'll be a ban in the plains? Somehow it's not a concern in the northeast because it's mountainous, and so there's no ban at all. Once again, that is not just inconsistent, surely that shows up the Supreme Court as contradictory.
Yeah, I agree, but let the legal eagles debate the merits, the judicial merits of the order. Honorable Supreme Court, with due respect to what they have said, why do they ignore that if a man buys liquor from the 501st meter, does it count as drunk, legally drunk? And is there something called illegally drunk versus legally drunk? And as Mr. P.N. Vijay rightly said, what about city roads? Now, drunken driving certainly is a huge problem, whether it's city roads or highways. Now, some states have gone and denotified their highways, like Goa has done that. Now, from next year onwards, the so-called state highways will stop getting money from the National Highway Authority of India for maintenance of roads. So there are huge implications for even denotifying highways, which some states have gone and done. So the Supreme Court should have looked into various aspects. For example, the states have not found any representation in this petition. Now there are state legislations also. Those state legislations have gone. National highways come under the Supreme Court, but what about the state highways? They are
right. But let's not get fixated on denotifying highways. That is one possible solution. Let's stick to the Supreme. I know, but let's stick to the core Supreme Court order. Ravi Kamal Gupta, here the Supreme Court's concern was drinking and driving. Unfortunately, you know this and I know this, that problem is really tackled by better policing, by much better prosecution, and possibly by more stringent punishment. Instead, what the Supreme Court has sought to do is to put a ban on the sale and consumption of alcohol. But as you heard Pavan Khera say, and as you heard P.N. Vijay say, people can drink 10 feet outside the 500-meter deadline and still drive dangerously. The Supreme Court has therefore sought to tackle a problem by a solution that is actually irrelevant to that problem. There are much better solutions available which the good judges, for some reason, didn't think of. I'll just end by saying, we're asking all these questions because, as you know as a lawyer, the Supreme Court is supreme not because it's infallible. It's far from infallible in this case. It's only supreme because it's final. That's why we raise these issues.
Yeah. Yes. I would like to clarify a few things. Number one, in no manner can it be said that the Honorable Supreme Court did a judicial legislation. Anybody who goes through the papers of the proceedings which were pending in the Honorable Supreme Court since 2014 would come across the orders passed by the Honorable Supreme Court from time to time, giving the states and the Attorney General ample opportunities to sit together and frame and come out with a policy of how to curb the menace of drunken driving. 3 years passed. None of the states participated in those meetings which were to be held at the place of the learned Attorney General. That is how we had to move an application for an early hearing, because the states had a stay order in their favor.
Mr. Gupta, I don't deny that the states have been slow and negligent in creating policies to curb the problem of drinking and driving. What I'm asking you is this, that the problem of drinking and driving is curbed by better policing, by stronger, stricter prosecution, by more stringent punishment, not by putting a ban. A 500-meter ban means, as you pointed out, on the 501st meter you can drink. This is not going to stop drunken driving. And if the Supreme Court thinks so, then the judges need to rethink their entire attitude.
I would completely agree with your suggestion.
You agree with my suggestion?
No. I would completely agree with your suggestion, but this step of the Supreme Court is only a small step in the right direction.
No, it's a wrong step.
We won't see it that way.
I'm saying to you, it's the wrong step in the wrong direction.
No, it is a right step.
All right, you say it's a right step, I say it's a wrong.
Let's then come
to the economic costs and consequences which will help the audience decide whether this is the right step or whether it is a step that the Indian economy will suffer from. Let me bring in Ankur Bhatia, because I want to start with you. We know that this step will affect hotels, restaurants and pubs located within the 500-meter distance of a national or state highway. Give me a sense of how badly, how seriously they will be affected.
Karan, we are looking at approximately at least 1 million jobs at stake across the country. We are looking at revenues worth tens of thousands of crores getting affected, both for the state, the center, as well as for individuals, because when you are serving liquor, of course, when you're vending liquor, you're paying heavy excise duties. On your profits, you're paying income taxes. You're employing people. The employees are actually paying taxes. So the effect is huge in terms of the overall impact of this particular order across the country.
Sanjay Hegde, one telling example of how businesses will be affected is that every single one of the 10 hotels built in Aero City in Delhi, and they're all new constructions, they're all about a year or two old and no more, will be unable to serve alcohol. Their business could effectively collapse. Now, these are major international hotel chains that have invested there. They came because the government gave them a guarantee that they could operate as hotels. They sought and trusted the government. Now they will be hugely upset, and I take it hereafter not only will they feel cheated and let down, they're not going to want to expand their business in India. Is the Supreme Court unaware of that entirely, or does it simply not care?
That may very well be true, but you must remember that the same thing happened even in 2G when sovereign wealth funds invested in Indian companies upon representations made by the Indian government, and despite that all the licenses got cancelled.
Left.
There is a maximum law of
and they felt they had been mistreated, and many in India agreed with them. What happened was not their fault, but they paid the penalty. The mistake was made by the government, the penalty was paid by someone else, but that's not justice, is it? That's not justice.
Well, there is a Roman maxim, fiat justita ruat coelum, that's let justice be done though the heavens fall. So once there is a judicial determination, if you are a country ruled by the law, then it is our duty to obey the law. That is the basis on which the legal system rests.
Forgive me, let me make a correction. No one intends to disobey the law. No one intends to disobey the law. And no one intends disrespect of the Supreme Court, but we have a right in a democracy to question the judgment of the Supreme Court without attributing motives. And we can question whether the Supreme Court got it right or got it wrong. And I want to put something to you, Mr. Vijay. Surely, judges have a duty to give justice. And in giving justice, they have to bear in mind the costs and consequence on the lives of people. Now, as Amitabh Kant has tweeted, and as Ankur Bhatia has said, 1 million people could lose their jobs. That's 1 million human beings losing their livelihood with their futures being at risk. Do you think the Supreme Court judges were aware of this and still went ahead? Or do you think they were unaware? Or do you think at the end of the day, their platonic, noble notion of justice is so overwhelming, they don't care about ordinary individuals who may as a result get quashed? Which of the three?
Now, I would imagine that the people from the other lawyer was saying, from the government side also did not put up the case as forcefully as you and I are putting it. I really believe, because I have the highest respect for the judgment of the Supreme Court, they have taken into account practical difficulties when it came to Ganga, Yamuna, B4, so many things. So this doesn't look as if maybe it was a badly defended case. Karan, I just want to give you a certain dimension to this. Of course, the 1 million jobs is there. Also, I was told 1 lakh crores of public sector banks' money and private equity investment will go down the drain in hotels, 2,500 odd hotels, which are going to close down or get loss making because of this. So just think, and the type of revenue that's going to be lost by the states and the center would be equivalent to about 3 to 4% of the fiscal deficit of states, which means they're going to raise taxes for every possible thing, to compensate. So it's, in a way, I'll say, impact will be about 3 successive droughts on the Indian economy. That's in my view the economic impact of this judgment.
You know, it's very interesting that you prefaced your answer by saying that very possibly the government's lawyers, whether the central government or state government lawyers, did not really explain to the Supreme Court judges the enormous consequences. I'll come to you, Sanjay, in a moment. The enormous consequences of what they were doing. I'll come to you in a moment, Sanjay. Hold on. But I want to first go to Mr. Pavan Khera. Do you know the extent of the loss this country could suffer simply in terms of lost revenue, Mr. Khera? The Hindu says the state of Kerala alone, which has the highest per capita consumption of liquor, will lose 7,000 crore. The paper says that nationwide, 35 to 40% of all liquor outlets are along highways. All of them will suffer. The overall loss of revenue will be literally in lakhs of crores, and one estimate is 1,000 crore a day, which is 365,000 crore, i.e. 3.65 lakh crore at the end of the year. That's, I believe, just over 2% of GDP. Now, do you think the Supreme Court was unconcerned about these consequences? Or was it just not aware? Because the government's lawyers, as Mr. Vijay says, did not argue their case properly? And if that's the case, shouldn't the judges have asked themselves questions and been aware of what they were doing?
No, pardon the sarcasm, but I'm glad people are calculating the losses that will come in view of this judgment. People were not bothered. There were no editorials about the so-called meat ban across the state of Uttar Pradesh and other states. Now, nobody was bothered about calculating the losses. Those poor meat retailers and...
But Mr. Khera, we're not talking about meat. I know as an opponent of the BJP, you see great virtue in widening the discussion to attack your opponents. But stick to the subject. Stick to the subject, please.
At the principle, I'd like to flag this. I'm sorry, you cannot stop me from flagging
I am going to stop you because the audience expects you to address the subject. We have limited time and I don't want you to go off the subject.
Back to the subject.
The audience has an interest in hearing you on the subject, which is alcohol banned by the Supreme Court. Please answer that.
Not heard in these primetime shows and in editorials. That's a huge concern. And I'm sorry, I will reiterate that. And coming back to what you asked, yes, the Supreme Court appears to be unmindful of the ramifications of this order. It's definitely, with again due regard to the Honorable Court, but I'm sorry, absolutely they were not aware of what's happening. What will be the implications?
Well, can I ask you that? When you say, Mr. Khera, when you say the Supreme Court was not aware, are you saying it's the fault of government lawyers not to make them aware? Or are you saying judges aren't expected to know economic things?
The onus lies on the government lawyer, no doubt about that. The government lawyer should have briefed the Honorable Court properly with all these data that you are now quoting from. Absolutely, it is definitely lies on the lawyer.
Let me bring in Sanjay Hegde.
Also, Karan.
I'll stop you for a moment. I want to bring in Sanjay Hegde first. I'm stopping you for a moment. Sanjay Hegde, off our panel today, you understand judges better. You're a senior lawyer. You know how they think. It's possible, as Mr. Vijay and Mr. Khera say, that government lawyers did not brief the Supreme Court. But I would say as a layman, and forgive me, I may be wrong, that judges, when they are imposing a ban, would know this will affect the liquor industry, it will affect hotels and restaurants, it will affect tourism, it will affect government revenue. Those are things that laymen would know. And therefore, I would assume judges would naturally ask questions about these. They would inform themselves of the consequences. Do you think they did and didn't care? Or do you think they looked at it and said, look, these consequences are immaterial, justice is more important?
Firstly, I must tell you that the government lawyers, including the Attorney General, did their utmost to tell the court, and they did inform the court. But the court has often heard this argument that the consequences would be huge and there would be job losses. But notwithstanding that, where the court has a decision to make, it makes that decision irrespective of the consequences. These kind of economic arguments were taken even in the mining cases in Karnataka, Goa and elsewhere. These arguments were taken in the coal block cases, in the 2G cases. The point ultimately is that the court is concerned, A, with the law, with upholding the majesty of the law.
But this is not the law. They created the law. Hang on, forgive me, I'm interrupting you. There was no majesty of law that they were upholding in this case. They've created the law. By creating the ban, they've created the law. Their main concern was safety. And I'm interrupting you. You can't argue, Mr. Hegde, you can't say the court was concerned with upholding the majesty of the law because there was no law. Mr. Hegde, pause a moment and listen to me.
It came to a determination of,
Mr. Hegde,
of 500 meters.
Mr. Hegde, please listen to me.
Thereafter, the court was invited to take a re-look, and all the problems
Mr. Hegde, you're repeating things we know. But
Despite
please listen
that,
to me.
The court has stuck largely
to me
to
for
the
a moment.
earlier verdict, making
Mr.
certain
Hegde,
exceptions like the hill states where there was no 500 meters of land available.
Mr. Hegde, please listen to me. I think it's very difficult to have a conversation if you won't let me interrupt you. You said that a court was upholding the majesty of the law. Mr. Hegde, pause. You have to pause so I can... Well, I think there's a problem. I think maybe you've lost my voice and you can't hear me, which is why you're not stopping. I want to bring in someone else at this point. I get the impression from that answer, Ankur Bhatia, that in the minds of the judges, what Sanjay Hegde calls the majesty of the law, this platonic, noble concept that they have of justice, is much more important than its implications and consequences on the lives of ordinary people, on the coffers of the state, on employment and industry. And it seems to me that that's a very odd way of looking at matters. I wish Sanjay was there to answer that question, but am I being unfair in coming to that suggestive conclusion that the judges value justice more than the impact on the lives of people, or is that an unfair way of viewing it? Please don't hesitate to correct me if you think I'm wrong. I'm inviting you to do so. I'm sharing a concern I have, which I think many others might have.
Karan, I think from a point of view of the way and how the judges are thinking, how they are doing it, I don't think I'm qualified to actually put an answer to that. But I'm sure about that if you have a look at the overall impact of this particular ban, tourism, jobs, marriages, most of the marriages in our country are actually conducted on highways because that's the way the urban infrastructure is developed. Now, if you were to put all of that in together and there was a qualified assessment made to it, it is a very tough decision to take to bilaterally ban ban the order the way it is standing today.
Mr. Vijay, I'm going to put the same question to you because it seems to me that many in the audience hearing our discussion will say judges value a platonic concept of justice. Understandably, justice is the business they're in. But they seem to value this platonic concept of justice more than they care about what happens to ordinary people, to their lives, to their rights, to government coffers, to government revenues, to economic growth, to huge industries that otherwise have been growing in recent years at 6 and 11%. Suddenly that could be damaged. Judges seem to undervalue all of that and value the platonic concept of justice more. Is that a fair conclusion for someone like me to come at? Is it a fair conclusion for the audience to think of? Are we being unfair to judges? I invite you to disagree, because I don't mean to be unfair to judges. I'm simply voicing and expressing a thought that might occur to many, many others. And sadly, I wanted to put it to Sanjay Hegde, but we seem to have a connectivity problem, so I'm putting it to you.
Karan, sadly enough, I totally agree with your argument. I think, I mean, everybody wants justice. This is a land of justice, and we all abide by the law. We all try to, at least. And this judgment, I think, has totally been insensitive to the myriads of problems that are being created, will be created, and I feel it's a very sad day. And Karan, I want to make one more point. If this solution, however, whatever you may call it, will solve the problem, I'll still go along with it. If it is a case of arsenic coming out of chemical factories in East Delhi, actually killing people, killing fish on the Yamuna, I would still say let us do it in spite of several thousand people. But there is no correlation in my view between this ban and the number of highway deaths. I can challenge you, 1 year from now there will be more, as much highway deaths as we had till now. I can challenge you on
You're
that.
probably
so
right,
Mr. Vijay.
Can I stop you? We've got Sanjay Hegde back. Sanjay Hegde, there's one simple question I want to put to you. You, before we lost you, were talking about judges upholding the majesty of the law. I accept that's what judges are there to do. But until they created the ban, there was no law. So they weren't upholding the majesty of the law. They are creating a law in their judgment that puts safety as paramount. On that premise, that safety is paramount, adults can't be treated as responsible, therefore bans have to be imposed. They created a law and then they upheld its majesty. But that to me is not a simple, straightforward act of justice. That's an interpretation about what should be the case. Then you make it the case because you're a judge. You do it on premises that are perhaps questionable, and then you end up saying, well, I'm upholding the majesty of the law. At what cost is this justice happening to ordinary people, their lives, their jobs, the exchequer? Answer that quickly because I need to take a break.
Well, there is academic writing to this effect that judges are essentially frustrated legislators. There is a thin line between adjudication and legislation, and on almost all occasions, judges are careful and stick to adjudication. Occasionally, courts are accused of law making rather than interpreting the law. If those interpretations get out of hand, the legislature is always there to step in.
Well, maybe this is an instance where the legislature will have to step in, or maybe we'll have to go back to the courts and ask the courts to think again. Pavan Khera, let's come to some of the measures that different state governments are considering. One is to turn state highways into district highways so the ban doesn't apply to them. Kerala is considering this. According to the papers, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bengal and the Union Territory of Chandigarh are also considering it. Do you believe this is a credible solution?
No, as I said, Karan, this definitely is not a credible solution, because when they are state highways, for maintenance they get funds from the National Highway of India every year. Next year, next financial year, they'll stop getting those funds because they've denotified their highways. Now that's a huge economic ramifications too. How will they cope with that? Are the state governments equipped with the kind of budget to maintain these former highways? Now that's a problem which even the state governments, I think they're also doing a very stopgap kind of under pressure from lobbies. I'm not passing a judgment. These pressures are also very legitimate because there are problems of job losses and revenue losses. So I think the state governments are also indulging into a very knee-jerk reaction. They should definitely go into a review petition, but till then, perhaps these knee-jerk reactions are the only answers they are left with.
Sanjay, let me ask you a specific legal question about this proposal to turn state highways into district highways. In the present circumstances, if it's being done to beat a Supreme Court ruling, would it be some form of contempt of court, or is that a misinterpretation?
I don't think it would amount to contempt, because this, just like the Supreme Court based its judgment on highways all over India, It is entirely within the executive and the legislative function to define what highways are. It's not unknown for governments to use legislative functions especially to overturn the basis of Supreme Court judgments. You must remember in Vodafone, when the Supreme Court struck down a tax demand, they reinstated it and with retrospective effect. A legislative fix may have to be considered, but for the moment we see a lot of governments trying to put in an administrative fix to the problem. Some of those fixes may just work.
What sort of fixes are there, very quickly?
This fix about denotifying state highways and turning them into district roads, it would then be technical compliance with the letter of the Supreme Court judgment. There is also a move now, I believe, that insofar as roads within towns and cities are concerned, they will no longer be treated as highways.
In other words, these would be very clever ways of changing what is a highway by changing the definition and thus ensuring that what the Supreme Court has ordered is not defined, it simply isn't applicable. P.N. Vijay, for states like Goa and Kerala, which are hugely dependent on tourism, the Supreme Court order could effectively cripple their economies. A lot of Goa and Kerala's development actually takes place along their highways. That's where the restaurants are, that's where the hotels are, that's where the tourists come and want to be. Do you think they have special grounds because of their geography and because of their economy to plead for a special exemption? Or would that be difficult to do?
I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't know whether there is a possibility for these two states, which are being portrayed in the Incredible India campaign as God's own country and so forth. But if they can, they should do it. And I think it is absolutely a good case for state governments, even the Delhi administration, to call. I was told that Ring Road is actually NH48. So right down Ring Road, you have to go dry, right through South Delhi, and preposterous things like that. So if Kerala and Goa, if they try to go for a plead, I don't know how successful they'll be. But if state governments do say that there are district roads which pass through towns, highways which pass through towns are district roads, and highways that pass through bigger towns and cities are urban roads, I think that will be absolutely justified, but because that's the truth of the matter.
Okay.
And as far as the money from the NH program is concerned, the Modi administration can always put out a directive that its money will also be available to district roads. I don't think that will be a great problem, really.
Ankur Bhatia, do you believe that this is an issue where the central government, perhaps under the personal supervision and direction of the Prime Minister himself, should take the matter up, either by the government going in some form of review petition to the Supreme Court, or by the government planning some other step or measure to save the industry, to save the jobs, to save the revenue? It's at a multi-level that this will hit the economy.
See, the thing is, the agenda of the Modi government, and specifically for Prime Minister Modi, has always been tourism. You know, he's done a lot in terms of getting the e-visas in and everything else around that fact as well. Now, this kind of a messaging of actually overnight not serving alcohol to customers who are actually, you know, flown all across the US or anywhere else, it does not send a right message out. And I think this is, I'm sure this is getting noted by the lawmakers and the politicians as well. And I'm sure that, you know, ways, as you rightly mentioned, of denotifying highways coming into cities, or any other means, by what means. But the fact is that the industry would need respite very quickly with this. And you know, tomorrow being a holiday, you know, I think we were caught by surprise because this all happened on a Friday evening. We had a weekend, we had a working day today, tomorrow is a holiday, and then we've got more, I mean, we need to have a solution very quickly.
You know, Ravi Kamal Gupta, your intention was to tackle the problem of drinking and driving, but we've ended up with a solution that could damage tourism, which is a growth sector. Mr. Modi identified it just yesterday in Udhampur. It's a critical growth sector. You could lose 1 million jobs. You could lose literally hundreds and thousands, lakh crores of revenue. You could damage an industry which is worth 1.5 lakh crore and has been growing in recent years at 6, 9 and 11%. Were all these consequences intended by you, or are you a bit shaken that what you wanted could end up with such a damaging impact on the economy and on people's lives?
No. Let me clarify two things. Number one, what was going on in the mind of the honorable judges of the Supreme Court were the data of annual road accidents which were taking place, the lakhs of lives, innocent lives rather, which were being lost because of the drunken driving things. Secondly, there were advisories from the central government only from 2004 itself, asking the state governments and the UTs to remove the liquor vans and any other places which serve liquor. Since 2004, the central government is up on this task to get the vans removed. Still, we had to fight till 2017 to get a judgment in our favor. Secondly, whenever this kind of a litigation comes up, one has to strike a balance between the robust revenue as also between the vital civil lives, because the expansion of one would necessarily result into the contraction of the other. So this time, the Honorable Supreme Court has given importance to the vital civil lives, so why do we worry? Secondly, as regards the denotification thing, UT Chandigarh was the first one to denotify its 12-year-old state highway into a major district road. We've already filed a petition in the Honorable Supreme Court challenging this denotification, which would be coming up in the next week, because there are judgments of the Supreme Court only that any legislation which is intended with a purpose or created with a purpose to water down the effect of the Supreme Court judgment has to be struck down.
All right, that's a very clear answer. In other words, you're saying that the attempt to denotify state highways is a way of avoiding the implications of the Supreme Court order will be struck down. I'll simply end by saying that, as you say, the Supreme Court has struck a balance between civil lives and the lives of people who lose their jobs, lose their employment, lose their livelihood, not to mention industry that suffers, not to mention tourism that suffers, not to mention the growth of the economy that suffers. If this is a balance, I wonder what would be unbalance. And I only ask that question rhetorically and philosophically, not with any disrespect to the Supreme Court.
All the advocates,
but I have to end the show there, Mr. Gupta. You opened a very important question. If this is balance, what would be unbalanced? Let the audience judge for themselves. My thanks to you in particular for joining us, and my thanks to all my other guests as well. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.